Good morning, everyone. Hello to friends and neighbors, and thanks for joining us again today for the poem of the day. Quick programming note, you might have noticed yesterday with the Jonathan Swift poem that I twice gave the wrong year of the poem. Two different wrong years, off by about 200 years. And I can assure you that that's not a confusion on my part. That was merely a struggle of just reading numbers. So I did post in the writing a correction for that, but points if you were paying attention and noticed that Jonathan Swift was not a 20th century poet, as I mistakenly said. So today, I'm meeting my mother for brunch, and I was thinking a little bit this morning about the ways in which our relationships with our parents change from when we're children to when we're adult children, and specifically the ways in which when we're younger they seem like these permanent figures, sometimes figures of joy and warmth and love, and sometimes figures in our young eyes of opposition and obstruction and frustration for us. But that when we're little kids, a lot of the times we don't really see them as fully fleshed out people, people who life has called to make large sacrifices for us, and people whose lives have been changed tremendously by having another person at the center of their life to take care of and to constantly be thinking about. And I was also thinking about when you don't live with your parents anymore and you get older and your parents are getting older, that you do have a certain sort of set number of times left that you're going to see them. And none of us know what those are, but that we live hoping that we always get to see our parents again and again for a long time, but also that we become more aware of their fragility and their vulnerability. And so I was directed to this poem called My Mother's Body by Howe. And she's an American poet, a contemporary who's still living. This poem was published in 2008. And I believe I said that correctly, 2008. So again, this is My Mother's Body by Howe. Bless my mother's body, the first song of her beating heart and her breathing. Her voice, which I could dimly hear, grew louder. From inside her body, I heard almost every word she said. Within that girl, I drove to the store and back, her feet pressing the pedals of the blue car, her voice, first gate to the cold, sunny mornings, rain, moonlight, snowfall, dogs. Her kidneys failed. The womb where I once lived is gone. Her young, astonished body pushed me down that long corridor, and my body hurt her. I knew that. 24 years old. I'm old enough to be that girl's mother, to smooth her hair, to look into her exultant, frightened eyes. Her bedsheets stained with chocolate, her heart in constant failure. It's a girl, someone must have said. She must have kissed me with her mouth. First grief, first air. And soon I was drinking her, first food. I was eating my mother. Slumped in her wheelchair, one of my brothers pushing it across the snowy lawn, her eyes fixed, her face averted. Bless this body she made. My long legs, her long arms and fingers. Our voice in my throat, speaking to you now. I've read this poem now, I think 4 times. And what initially jumped out to me is that it's in a set of 2-line stanzas. We could call them couplets, although they don't rhyme, so I think 2-line stanzas is more appropriate. And with each 2-line stanza, they're all enjambed, meaning that the stanzas don't end always on fixed punctuation or on the end of a thought or the end of an image or the end of an idea. So there's a sense of a bleeding together here. And the bleeding together, for me, evokes the way that memory kind of invades the present. And as I spend time with my parents now, I do notice their own bodies growing older, but that a lot of our time spent together is in these invigorating conversations about the past and about memories that bring the past back into the presence. And so while I am aware when I see the bodies of my parents that there's a mortality there, the reinvigorating power of these memories gestures towards a sort of permanence of spirit. And that's something that I see a lot in Howe's poem. Other ways in which I see this sort of bleeding together, this impermeability of barriers, is not just structural in the poem, but also the way in which it jumps back and forth in time, often without clear signals of it. It begins in a sort of reflection on the mother's body and the speaker inside the mother's body. She, around the fourth stanza, then jumps to her kidneys failed. And so we're now much farther in the future, I'm thinking, where the mother in older age has died. Merely 3 lines later, we get the reflection, my body hurt her. I know that, 24 years old. So now within this line, we're kind of simultaneously at the point in which the mother was 24 years old and when the speaker was 24 years old. The speaker then reflects, presumably from a place in the future, I'm old enough to be that girl's mother. This line and this idea right in the middle of the poem is reminds me of something that I've experienced. While I'm not a parent, I do sort of do the math of, I'm now 35 years old. My mother's about to turn 64. And so when she was 35, I was 6 years old, if I'm doing the math correctly. And when I was 6 years old, I saw my mother as I described earlier, just as this sort of figure of permanence, not as a fully fleshed out human being. And now that I am 35 and I reflect back on that, I can somewhat imagine, while I'm not a parent, what sort of changes and sacrifices and mindset that must have required, and what a pest I must have been at 6 years of age. But as I kind of continue to grow in this ability to think of my parents as when they were my own age, it gives me a sense of empathy for them, or a sense of understanding of them as human beings. One last thing I want to point out in this poem, for the sake of keeping the video relatively short, is that the word her appears in it 18 or 19 times. We begin, the first line is bless my mother's body, which is a sort of command, a sort of exalting or a sanctifying command. And the second to last line, the last stanza, begins, bless this body she made. So we have within the poem what seems like a transference of the blessing from my mother to the speaker's self, the speaker's own body. But throughout the entire poem, those two things have been enmeshed and blurred together, right? There's a sense of a sharing there between both of those women's bodies. And the hers that dominate most of the poem give way in the last 2 lines. Bless this body she made, my long legs, her long arms and fingers, our voice in my throat speaking to you now. So we end the poem in the present, right? In the now, the occasion of the speaker speaking to us through the moment of reading, which is always an eternal present whenever we as readers encounter it. But we have the body she made, my long legs, her arms and fingers, our throat. So we sort of go back and forth between the characteristics of the mother and the physical characteristics of the speaker, and then they're joined together within the voice. And that voice, I think, is not just the creative expression of the author, the thing that the author of the poem or the speaker of the poem gives life to, but it's also that kind of biblical life-giving breath that 5 lines earlier is described as her first grief, first air, right? That when presented with this girl that she'd given birth to, the speaker imagines that there was as sort of an exhale at once of sort of relief, but also of oh no, look at the ways in which my life is going to change. So there's, I think, a grace and a maturity to the way in which the speaker looks back on her relationship with her mother and her mother's life, and the way that those two things are entwined together, both always moving towards death, but also both always regenerating things in a creative and life-giving way. So I guess today, perhaps more than other days, it being a weekend and us lingering on this poem, if you have a moment, maybe close your eyes and think of your own parents, call their faces to mind. And I'm not going to tell you what to think about, because everybody has different relationships to their parents, and so they'll have different emotions that are conjured at this. But maybe pay attention to those emotions that arise within you when you think about them and when you picture them. And are you able to imagine what they would have been like as people who are participating in that creation, but also in that dying at the same time, when they were around your age, whether they were able to be in relationship with you at that time or not? And maybe you're at a point where you're older now than your parents ever were. My mother's certainly there. Her mother did not live to be the age that she's at now. And in what ways does that complicate your relationship with them as they exist in your mind and in your spirit now? Have a wonderful day. I hope you have a restful and a generative Saturday. I hope it's a beautiful day for you, full of lots of gifts, and I wish you all peace.